want to know what your therapist won't tell you about mental health? Here's the first uncomfortable truth. You are not just a victim of a broken mental health system. You are its willing accomplice. Every time you scroll through Instagram comparing your behind the scenes to someone else's highlight reel, every time you seek validation instead of truth, every time you choose comfortable lies over painful growth, you are feeding the very machine that devours your peace of mind. Friedrich Nietzsche once declared that whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster. But what happens when you realize you've been the monster all along? What happens when the abyss you've been staring into reveals your own reflection? Today, we're going to hold up a philosophical mirror that will make you squirm. Because the 10 things your therapist won't tell you aren't just about mental health. They're about the fundamental deception you've been living, the unconscious drives that puppet your choices, and the terrifying possibility that your suffering isn't accidental. It's exactly what you've been unconsciously choosing. Your mental health crisis is a symptom of your values crisis. Your therapist won't tell you this because it threatens the entire therapeutic industrial complex. Most mental health problems aren't chemical imbalances or trauma responses, they're values crises, masquerading as psychological disorders. Nietzsche understood that when a culture's values collapse, individuals don't just feel lost, they become psychologically fragmented. He called this the death of God, but he wasn't talking about religion. He was talking about the collapse of any organizing principle that gives life meaning and direction. Look around. You live in a society that worships success but defines it as accumulation. You're told to follow your passion while being economically punished for anything that doesn't generate profit. You're encouraged to be authentic while algorithms reward conformity. Is it any wonder you feel anxious and depressed? But here's what makes you complicit. Instead of questioning these contradictory values, you internalize them. Instead of recognizing that a society built on infinite growth using finite resources might be psychologically toxic, you assume something is wrong with you for not thriving in it. Your depression isn't a malfunction, it's your psyche's rational response to an irrational world. But rather than change the world, you'd rather medicate the messenger.
If our content resonates with your style, don't forget to subscribe and support us. Thank you.
You're addicted to your own suffering. This is perhaps the cruelest truth. Your therapist won't voice directly, you don't actually want to get better. You want to get better. There's a profound difference. Nietzsche wrote about amor fati, love of fate, but most people practice its shadow amor miseria, love of misery. Why? Because suffering has become your identity, your social currency, your excuse for not taking the terrifying leap into authentic living. Think about it. How often do you bond with others over shared complaints? How often does your suffering become the story that makes you interesting, sympathetic, worthy of attention? Your depression isn't just something you have, it's something you are. And if you weren't depressed, who would you be? This is why therapy often fails. It assumes you want to eliminate your symptoms, but symptoms often serve unconscious functions. Your anxiety might be protecting you from risks that could lead to growth. Your depression might be shielding you from the responsibility that comes with recognizing your own power. You say you want to be happy, but happiness requires you to give up the comfortable familiarity of your suffering. It requires you to stop being the victim of your story and become its author. That's terrifying. Suffering is predictable. Happiness is not. The mental health industry profits from your permanent dysfunction. Here's what the therapeutic establishment won't admit: they have a vested interest in keeping you slightly sick. Not sick enough to be dangerous, but sick enough to keep coming back. Nietzsche's concept of the will to power explains this perfectly. Every system seeks first to preserve and expand itself. The mental health industry has grown into a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. What happens to that enterprise if people actually get well? Consider this psychological manipulation you're taught: that mental health is about managing conditions, not curing them. You're told that therapy is a process that takes years. You're convinced that medication is about balance, not resolution. Notice the language. It's all about perpetual treatment, never about completion. But you participate in this because it serves your unconscious needs too. Permanent patienthood means permanent exemption from full responsibility. It means you always have an explanation for why you can't quite reach your potential. It's a conspiracy between your fear of growth and their fear of losing customers. The truly uncomfortable question, what would you do if you couldn't blame your mental health for your life's limitations? Who would you have to become? Your relationships are psychological defense mechanisms. Your therapist might touch on this, but they won't say it directly. Most of your relationships aren't based on love or genuine connection. They're elaborate psychological defense systems designed to protect you from confronting yourself. Nietzsche understood that people often seek others not to know themselves better, but to avoid self-knowledge entirely. We choose partners who confirm our existing self-image, friends who share our complaints, and communities that reinforce our biases. Look at your closest relationships honestly. How many of them encourage your growth versus enabling your stagnation? How many challenge you to become better versus comfort you for staying the same? How many love you for who you could become versus who you are right now? You stay in toxic relationships because they're familiar. You avoid healthy relationships because they demand growth. You surround yourself with people who need you to stay broken because their own identity depends on being your rescuer, your fellow victim, or your partner in mediocrity. This is why breakups and friendship endings are so psychologically devastating. You're not just losing a person, you're losing a mirror that reflected back a version of yourself you were comfortable being. Without that external validation of your identity, you have to face the terrifying question, who are you really? Your therapy has become a substitute for living. This might be the hardest pill to swallow. Therapy has become your escape from life, not your preparation for it. You've turned self-analysis into self-indulgence, insight into inaction. Nietzsche warned against what he called philosophical pessimism, the tendency to analyze life so thoroughly that you forget to live it. Modern therapy culture has created psychological pessimism, the belief that you need to understand your trauma, decode your patterns, and resolve your issues before you can fully engage with life. But here's the trap. Understanding your psychology doesn't automatically change it. Knowing why you procrastinate doesn't make you productive. Analyzing your relationship patterns doesn't make you a better partner. Identifying your triggers doesn't eliminate them. You spend hours in therapy sessions dissecting your childhood, but won't spend an hour learning a new skill. You can recite your attachment style, but can't maintain eye contact during difficult conversations. You know all the psychological terminology, but lack the practical tools for meaningful change. Therapy has become your substitute for the hero's journey. Instead of facing your dragons in the real world, you're analyzing them in climate-controlled offices. Instead of earning wisdom through lived experience, you're collecting insights like trophies, the most damning evidence. After years of therapy, are you actually living differently? Or just thinking about living differently with more sophisticated vocabulary? You're psychologically colonized by others' expectations. Your therapist might explore your people-pleasing tendencies, but they won't frame it in terms of what it really is: psychological colonization. Your mind has been occupied by foreign values, expectations, and definitions of success that have nothing to do with your authentic nature. Nietzsche's concept of the Bermensch isn't about superiority, it's about authenticity. It's about becoming who you truly are beneath the layers of social conditioning, family expectations, and cultural programming. But most people never even attempt this archaeological dig into their authentic self. Instead, you live as a psychological refugee in your own life. You pursue careers that look impressive to others while dying inside. You maintain relationships that provide social proof while providing no actual intimacy. You chase goals that sound good when you tell them to people while secretly knowing They mean nothing to you. The evidence is everywhere. You can't make a decision without consulting others. You can't feel good about an achievement until it's validated externally. You can't trust your own judgment because you've never developed it. You've always outsourced it to parents, peers, society, or social media. This is why you feel so empty even when your life looks successful from the outside. You're living someone else's dream while your own dreams atrophy from neglect. You're a stranger in your own life, and that stranger is slowly dying of suffocation. Your mental health problems are moral problems in disguise. This is perhaps what your therapist will never tell you because it challenges the entire medical model of mental health. Many of your psychological problems aren't health issues, they're moral issues. They're the psychological consequences of living against your own values, compromising your integrity, and betraying your authentic self. Nietzsche understood that psychological suffering often stems from what he called bad conscience, the internal conflict that arises when you act against your deeper nature. Modern psychology medicalizes this conflict, but philosophy recognizes it as moral distress. Consider this. How much of your anxiety comes from lying? Not just lying to others, but lying to yourself about what you want, what you believe, what you're willing to tolerate. How much of your depression stems from the slow death of your integrity, compromise by compromise, rationalization by rationalization? You feel guilty because you are guilty not of crimes, but of self-betrayal. You feel ashamed because you have abandoned yourself. You feel anxious because you're living a life that requires constant vigilance to maintain its illusions. The pharmaceutical industry wants you to believe this is about neurotransmitters. The therapy industry wants you to believe it's about processing trauma. But what if it's simpler and more challenging than both? What if it's about living with honor? What if your psychological symptoms are your soul's way of telling you that the life you're living is not the life you came here to live? You use mental health language to avoid responsibility. Your generation has weaponized mental health terminology to avoid accountability. And your therapist won't call this out, because it would end half their sessions immediately. I have anxiety has become I don't have to do difficult things. I'm triggered has become you're not allowed to challenge me. I need to protect my mental health has become I can avoid any uncomfortable situation without explanation. Nietzsche wrote about slave morality, the tendency to make virtues out of weaknesses and use suffering as a form of power. Modern mental health culture has perfected this. Your diagnosis becomes your identity, your limitations become your boundaries, your fears become your rights. But here's the psychological trap. Every time you use mental health language to avoid responsibility, you reinforce your own powerlessness. Every time you say I can't because of my anxiety, you make your anxiety more real, more solid, more limiting. This doesn't mean your struggles aren't real, they are. But it means you have a choice in how you relate to them. You can see them as immutable facts about yourself or as challenges to overcome. You can use them as explanations for limitation or as invitations for growth. The difference between these approaches isn't just semantic, it's the difference between remaining a victim of your psychology and becoming its master. Your trauma has become your prison. This will make you angry, but it needs to be said. You have turned your trauma into a prison and thrown away the key. What was once something that happened to you has become something you are, and you defend this identity more fiercely than you defend your own potential for healing. Nietzsche understood that what does not kill me makes me stronger, but he also understood that this requires active transformation of pain into power. Most people do the opposite. They crystallize their pain into permanent limitations. Your trauma is real. Your pain is valid, but what you've done with that trauma and pain is a choice. And it's a choice you make every day. You can use your past to explain your present, or you can use your present to transform your past's meaning. But transformation requires you to give up something precious, your special status as a trauma survivor. It requires you to stop being interesting because of what happened to you and start being interesting because of what you've done with what happened to you. This is why therapy often keeps people stuck in their trauma rather than helping them transcend it. Processing and reprocessing traumatic events without focusing on growth and transformation can become a form of psychological self-harm, a compulsive returning to wounds that should be healing. The question isn't whether your trauma is real, it is. The question is whether you're going to let it define the rest of your life, or use it as raw material for becoming someone extraordinary. The real mental health crisis is spiritual emptiness. Here's the final truth your therapist won't tell you, because it would make most of modern psychology obsolete. The mental health crisis isn't primarily psychological, it's spiritual. You're not struggling with chemical imbalances or unprocessed trauma. You're struggling with meaninglessness. Nietzsche predicted this. When he announced the death of God, he wasn't celebrating, he was warning. He understood that when a culture loses its spiritual center, individuals don't just lose faith. They lose the psychological structures that make life bearable. You live in a culture that has systematically destroyed every source of transcendent meaning. Religion is mocked, tradition is discarded, family is deconstructed, community is replaced by social media, and purpose is reduced to personal happiness. Then you wonder why you feel anxious and depressed. Your ancestors faced plagues, wars, famines, and early death. But they had something you don't, a cosmic story that gave their suffering meaning. They knew why they were here, what they were supposed to do, and what happened when they died. You have Netflix, antidepressants, and the gnawing suspicion that none of this matters. This is why therapy focused only on feeling better often fails. You can't think your way out of an existential crisis. You can't medicate meaninglessness. You can't self-care your way to significance. The real prescription for mental health isn't more therapy or better medication, it's finding something worth suffering for. It's discovering a purpose bigger than your own comfort. It's connecting to something transcendent, whether you call it God, nature, humanity, or simply the magnificent mystery of existence itself. So here we are, at the end of our philosophical journey, through the landscape of modern mental health deception. You came here expecting to learn what your therapist won't tell you. Instead, you've learned what you won't tell yourself. The uncomfortable truth is that you have been complicit in every single thing I've described. You have chosen comfort over growth, familiarity over authenticity, victimhood over responsibility. You have used mental health language to avoid the terrifying freedom of being fully human. But here's what Nietzsche understood: that modern psychology has forgotten recognizing your complicity isn't the end of the story, it's the beginning. The moment you stop blaming your parents, your trauma, your brain chemistry, or society for your limitations is the moment you reclaim your power to transcend them. You have a choice right now. You can close this video, return to your comfortable delusions, and continue participating in the psychological theater that keeps you small. You can keep seeking therapists who will validate your limitations, friends who enable your stagnation, and solutions that require no real change from you. Or you can do something terrifying. You can start living as if your life matters, as if your choices have consequences, as if you have the power to become someone extraordinary despite everything that has happened to you and everything that is happening around you. This choice isn't comfortable. It's not safe. It doesn't come with guarantees or support groups or insurance coverage, but it's the only choice that leads to authentic mental health. The decision to stop being a victim of your psychology and start being its master. The abyss you've been staring into isn't empty, it's full of potential. Your potential. The question is, are you brave enough to jump? But wait, if you think taking control of your mental health is challenging, you need to see what I discovered about the invisible rules controlling your entire life. Most people live their whole lives following scripts written by others without even realizing it. Click on my next video to learn the 7 signs you're living by other people's rules through Carl Jung's revolutionary insights, because breaking free from psychological manipulation is just the beginning of your journey to authentic living.